There is a moment when the inner world no longer asks for answers, not because everything has been explained, but because the need to explain quietly fades. This is where the experience begins, not with urgency, not with effort, not with awareness sharpened towards something unseen. It begins with permission to remain. As you stay here, nothing is being activated, nothing is being summoned, nothing is being forced to move. The space you are entering does not respond to pressure because it was never built on pressure in the first place. It was built on presence. Presence does not rush. Presence does not defend itself. Presence does not scan the horizon for what might approach. It simply remains. Psalm 91 speaks of dwelling, not visiting. Dwelling implies continuity. It implies familiarity. It implies a place that does not need to be entered again and again because it was never left. As the words continue, allow them to exist in the background. There is no need to follow each sentence. The meaning does not accumulate through attention. It settles through repetition and time. Time is doing the work here. The body does not need to adjust. The mind does not need to focus. The breath does not need to change. Nothing is required to sustain this environment. Many forms of pressure operate quietly. They do not announce themselves as fear or anxiety. They appear as readiness, as vigilance, as the sense that something must be managed, even when nothing is happening. That readiness can rest now. There is no task waiting beneath the surface, no condition to satisfy. No moment that must be prepared for. Preparation belongs to uncertainty. Uncertainty is not organizing this space. As this continues, you may notice that thoughts slow without effort, not because they are stopped, but because they are no longer needed to maintain control. Control dissolves when safety is assumed rather than defended. Psalm 91 does not describe safety as something achieved. It describes safety as something inhabited. When safety is inhabited long enough, the nervous system learns that vigilance is unnecessary. Learning happens quietly. Nothing dramatic marks this shift. There is no signal, no confirmation, no sensation that demands interpretation. The absence of signal is itself the message. As time passes, the inner world becomes less reactive to subtle cues. Sounds, sensations, and internal movements pass without forming patterns. Patterns require engagement. Engagement has softened. What once felt like background pressure begins to lose relevance, not because it was confronted, but because it no longer has a role to play. Pressure requires a system that responds to it. Here, response is not required. This is not resistance, this is incompatibility. As the environment remains unchanged, familiarity deepens. Familiarity is what allows the deepest layers to rest. When something is familiar, the system stops checking it. Checking ends. Psalm 91 speaks of a covering that remains through night and day. This continuity matters. Continuity teaches the body that safety is not conditional on awareness or effort. You do not need to stay alert to remain protected. You do not need to understand to remain held. Held does not feel tight. Held feels neutral. As the words continue, they are not leading you forward. They are staying with you. Forward movement would imply distance from where you already are. There is no distance to cross. You are already inside the environment. Allow the time to pass without marking it. Allow the quiet to remain without noticing it. The experience does not deepen through attention. It deepens through duration. Duration is enough. Nothing needs to happen next. Nothing needs to resolve. Nothing needs to arrive. The refuge remains. As the space remains steady, the inner world gradually stops referencing itself. There is no longer a sense of monitoring how calm you are, how focused you are, or whether anything has shifted. These questions belong to a different state. Here, they do not arise. What remains does not need confirmation. When nothing inside is asking for proof, the system settles into something deeper than calm. Calm can come and go. What forms here is stability, quiet, unremarkable, and reliable. Stability does not announce itself. It does not feel dramatic. It feels ordinary in the best sense. Psalm 91 speaks of a place where the night does not change the nature of protection. Night often amplifies inner movement. Thoughts become louder, sensations become more noticeable. Here, night does not reorganize anything. The same covering remains. As time continues, the body releases subtle forms of holding that were so familiar they were no longer noticed, not through intention, but through absence of demand. Muscles do not need instruction to soften when there is nothing to brace against. Bracing has ended. The mind follows the body into this release. Thoughts may still arise, but they do not carry weight. They do not connect to one another. They pass like background noise without forming stories. Stories require tension. Tension is not present. As the words continue, they remain even and predictable. This predictability is intentional. It allows the nervous system to remain at rest without responding to novelty. Novelty would invite attention. Attention would invite readiness. Readiness has dissolved. Psalm 91 describes a dwelling that remains through unseen hours. Hours when nothing is watched. Hours when awareness drifts. Hours when rest deepens naturally. The environment does not thin when awareness fades. It remains intact. As time passes, awareness may widen or soften. Sometimes it feels distant, sometimes close. Neither state changes the effect. The process does not depend on clarity. It depends on continuity. Continuity is present. The unseen pressures that once followed you relied on interruption. They needed moments of disturbance to reassert themselves. Here, disturbance does not occur. The environment is too consistent to support it. Consistency dissolves intrusion. As familiarity deepens, the inner world stops distinguishing between protection and rest. They become the same thing. Rest is no longer a pause from vigilance. It is the default condition. Default conditions shape everything quietly. Psalm 91 speaks of protection as something that surrounds rather than intervenes. Surrounding does not act. It simply exists around everything else, unchanged. As the words continue, there is no instruction to move, to feel, or to respond. Movement would suggest a direction to go. There is no direction here. Remaining is enough. Remaining does not require effort. It does not require focus. It does not require intention. It happens because nothing interferes. As more time passes, the sense of inner pressure becomes increasingly distant, not as a memory but as something irrelevant. What is irrelevant no longer organizes attention. Organization dissolves. Without organization around threat or anticipation, the inner world becomes spacious without feeling empty. Space here is supportive. It allows everything to settle without collapse. As the environment remains unchanged, the system learns that safety does not need to be renewed. It is not temporary. It does not expire when attention shifts. Learning at this level is quiet and permanent. Allow the duration to continue. Allow the words to remain in the background. Allow the state to sustain itself without interference. Nothing needs to be completed. Nothing needs to be understood. Nothing needs to be remembered. The refuge remains active, and the quiet continues, steady and uninterrupted, as time passes without demand. As the continuity remains undisturbed, the inner world no longer reacts to the idea of time passing. Minutes are no longer counted, hours are no longer anticipated. The experience is not something that unfolds, it is something that stays. Staying does not require awareness, it does not require effort, it does not require direction. It happens because nothing interrupts it. Psalm 91 speaks of a dwelling that remains even when attention drifts, even when awareness softens, even when the mind rests in the background. The protection described is not activated by focus. It exists regardless of it. This is why vigilance can release completely. Vigilance belonged to a different environment, one where safety depended on readiness. Here, readiness has no function. There is nothing approaching, nothing advancing, nothing organizing the inner world. As time continues, the body remains supported without instruction. There is no subtle urge to adjust posture or regulate breath. Breath moves naturally. Posture settles naturally. The body recognizes this environment as safe. Recognition happens without words. As the words continue, they remain even and unchanging. This sameness allows the nervous system to stay at rest. Nothing new needs to be processed. Nothing unexpected needs to be met. Unexpectedness dissolves. Without unexpectedness, the system does not mobilize. Without mobilization, fatigue cannot form. This is why long listening becomes easy. The experience does not tax attention, it supports it. Psalm 91 speaks of covering through unseen hours. Hours when nothing is monitored. Hours when rest deepens quietly. This environment remains consistent through all of them. Consistency teaches the body that it does not need to return to vigilance later. There is no later to prepare for. As minutes pass, thoughts may arise briefly and fade. They do not connect. They do not gather. They do not form patterns. Pattern making requires tension. Tension is absent. As the environment remains unchanged, the inner world no longer references previous states. There is no comparison to before. No memory of pressure is needed to confirm relief. Relief does not need confirmation. It is structural. Structural peace does not fluctuate. As time continues, awareness may soften further. Sometimes it feels distant. Sometimes it feels diffuse. Both are signs that the system is no longer anchoring itself to effort. Effort has ended. Psalm 91 does not describe safety as something that must be checked repeatedly. It describes safety as something that remains whether it is noticed or not. This is what is happening now. As the words continue, they do not lead toward a conclusion. They remain open, allowing the state to extend beyond them. There is no sense of nearing an end. Endings would suggest separation. Separation does not occur here. Allow the quiet to remain without noticing it. Allow the time to pass without marking it. Allow the environment to hold without engagement. Nothing needs to change. Nothing needs to resolve. Nothing needs to arrive. The refuge remains, and the state continues, steady, unforced, and uninterrupted, as time moves on without demand. As the space remains exactly as it is, the inner world settles even further into familiarity. Familiarity does not require attention. It does not ask to be recognized. It simply becomes the background against which everything else exists. When something becomes background, it no longer competes for awareness. It supports quietly. Psalm 91 speaks of a place that does not need reinforcement. Reinforcement would imply fragility. This environment is not fragile. It remains because nothing is challenging it. As time continues, the body stays grounded without effort. There is no impulse to correct, no subtle tension waiting to be released. What needed to soften has already softened. What needed to rest is already resting. Rest does not deepen through effort. It deepens through absence of interruption. As the words continue, they remain predictable and gentle. Predictability is not dull here. It is stabilizing. It allows the nervous system to remain settled without scanning for change. Scanning has ended. Without scanning, the inner world no longer prepares for possibility. Possibility implies uncertainty. Uncertainty has no role here. Nothing is approaching. Nothing is forming. Psalm 91 describes protection that surrounds rather than intervenes. Surrounding does not move. It does not react. It simply remains present in every direction. As minutes pass, awareness becomes less centered on any point. There is no focal tension, no place where attention must remain. Awareness is free to soften and spread. This spreading is not loss. It is safety expressing itself. The unseen pressures that once relied on contraction cannot exist in this openness. They require compression, edges, and resistance. None of those are present. As the environment remains unchanged, the inner world stops distinguishing between listening and resting. Both are the same now. Both sustain the same state. This merging is quiet and complete. Psalm 91 speaks of dwelling through unseen hours, hours when nothing is checked, hours when awareness drifts without consequence. The environment remains intact through all of them. As time continues, the sense of holding on dissolves entirely. There is nothing to hold, nothing to maintain, nothing to keep in place. What remains stays without effort. As the words continue, they do not invite response. They do not request attention. They exist as part of the environment, not as guidance. Guidance would imply movement. Movement has ended. Allow the duration to continue. Allow the quiet to remain without notice. Allow the state to sustain itself. Nothing needs to be concluded. Nothing needs to be understood. Nothing needs to be remembered. The refuge remains, and the calm continues, steady, familiar, and uninterrupted, as time passes without demand. As the quiet remains consistent, the inner world no longer relates to itself through effort. There is no sense of maintaining calm or sustaining presence. Presence is no longer an action. It is simply the condition that remains when nothing interferes. Interference has dissolved. Psalm 91 speaks of abiding, not striving. Abiding does not require strength. It does not require intention. It happens naturally when the environment no longer demands response. As time continues, the body remains supported in a way that feels almost invisible. Support does not call attention to itself. It does not need to be acknowledged to function. Acknowledgement would imply effort. Effort is absent. The mind follows this same pattern. Thoughts arise gently and pass without leaving traces. They do not pull awareness forward or backward. They do not create momentum. Momentum has ended. Without momentum, there is no internal movement to track. The system does not anticipate what comes next. There is no internal timeline unfolding beneath the surface. Time becomes spacious. Psalm 91 describes protection that remains through darkness and light alike. The environment does not change when awareness softens. It does not thin when attention drifts. It remains intact without supervision. Supervision is no longer required. As minutes pass, the inner world becomes less interested in itself. Self-observation fades. There is no need to check how things feel. Feeling is stable. Stability does not invite commentary. As the words continue, they do not introduce new ideas. They do not redirect attention. They remain consistent, allowing the nervous system to stay settled. Consistency teaches rest. The unseen pressures that once relied on disruption cannot find an opening here. They depended on contrast, moments of calm followed by disturbance. Contrast no longer occurs. Without contrast, pressure cannot organize. As familiarity deepens, the inner world stops relating to past states. There is no comparison to what once was. Memory does not need to be referenced to confirm safety. Safety is assumed. Psalm 91 speaks of a refuge that does not close. It does not open and shut. It remains available without change. Remaining is its defining quality. As the duration continues, awareness may soften further. Sometimes it drifts, sometimes it rests lightly. Both are supported equally. Support does not discriminate. As the words remain gentle and steady, they begin to feel less like language and more like atmosphere. Atmosphere does not instruct, it surrounds. Surrounding allows everything else to rest. Allow the time to continue without marking it. Allow the quiet to remain without noticing it. Allow the state to sustain itself. Nothing needs to be completed. Nothing needs to arrive. Nothing needs to resolve. The refuge remains, and the stillness continues, uninterrupted, familiar, and free from demand as time passes quietly onward. As the quiet remains consistent, the inner world no longer relates to itself through effort. There is no sense of maintaining calm or sustaining presence. Presence is no longer an action. It is simply the condition that remains when nothing interferes. Interference has dissolved. Psalm 91 speaks of abiding, not striving. Abiding does not require strength. It does not require intention. It happens naturally when the environment no longer demands response. As time continues, the body remains supported in a way that feels almost invisible. Support does not call attention to itself. It does not need to be acknowledged to function. Acknowledgement would imply effort. Effort is absent. The mind follows this same pattern. Thoughts arise gently and pass without leaving traces. They do not pull awareness forward or backward. They do not create momentum. Momentum has ended. Without momentum, there is no internal movement to track. The system does not anticipate what comes next. There is no internal timeline unfolding beneath the surface. Time becomes spacious. Psalm 91 describes protection that remains through darkness and light alike. The environment does not change when awareness softens. It does not thin when attention drifts. It remains intact without supervision. Supervision is no longer required. As minutes pass, the inner world becomes less interested in itself. Self-observation fades. There is no need to check how things feel. Feeling is stable. Stability does not invite commentary. As the words continue, they do not introduce new ideas. They do not redirect attention. They remain consistent, allowing the nervous system to stay settled. Consistency teaches rest. The unseen pressures that once relied on disruption cannot find an opening here. They depended on contrast, moments of calm followed by disturbance. Contrast no longer occurs. Without contrast, pressure cannot organize. As familiarity deepens, the inner world stops relating to past states. There is no comparison to what once was. Memory does not need to be referenced to confirm safety. Safety is assumed. Psalm 91 speaks of a refuge that does not close. It does not open and shut. It remains available without change. Remaining is its defining quality. As the duration continues, awareness may soften further. Sometimes it drifts. Sometimes it rests lightly. Both are supported equally. Support does not discriminate. As the words remain gentle and steady, they begin to feel less like language and more like atmosphere. Atmosphere does not instruct, it surrounds. Surrounding allows everything else to rest. Allow the time to continue without marking it. Allow the quiet to remain without noticing it. Allow the state to sustain itself. Nothing needs to be completed. Nothing needs to arrive. Nothing needs to resolve. The refuge remains, and the stillness continues, uninterrupted, familiar, and free from demand, as time passes quietly onward. As the quiet remains steady, the inner world no longer distinguishes between rest and awareness. Both coexist without effort. Awareness does not scan. Rest does not collapse. Everything remains balanced without instruction. Balance here is not something achieved, it is something allowed. Psalm 91 speaks of abiding without interruption. Abiding does not move toward anything. It does not wait for confirmation. It remains because nothing challenges it. As time continues, the body settles into this allowance more completely. There is no sense of holding posture or regulating breath. The body knows how to remain when there is nothing to brace against. Bracing belonged to vigilance. Vigilance has ended. The mind follows this same pattern. Thoughts arise gently and pass without forming direction. They do not call attention to themselves. They do not request meaning. Meaning-making is unnecessary here. As the words continue, they do not guide attention forward. They do not invite effort. They exist as part of the environment, not as instruction. Instruction would imply movement. Movement is absent. Psalm 91 describes protection that surrounds rather than intervenes. Surrounding does not act. It simply remains present in every direction, unchanged by awareness or time. As minutes pass, the sense of internal boundaries softens. There is no clear edge where attention must stay. Awareness is free to widen without losing stability. This widening does not create drift. It creates space. The unseen pressures that once relied on contraction cannot exist in this openness. They required tightness, urgency, and response. None of these are present. As familiarity deepens, the inner world stops referencing itself entirely. There is no sense of "how am I doing?" That question has lost relevance. Relevance dissolves. Psalm 91 speaks of remaining through unseen hours. Hours when nothing is monitored. Hours when awareness fades and returns without consequence. The environment remains intact through all of them. As the duration continues, the experience does not thin. It does not lose depth. Depth remains because nothing interrupts it. Interruption is absent. Allow the quiet to remain without noticing it. Allow the time to pass without marking it. Allow the state to sustain itself naturally. Nothing needs to be concluded. Nothing needs to be resolved. Nothing needs to be remembered. The refuge remains, and the stillness continues, stable, familiar, and uninterrupted as time moves forward without demand. As the environment remains consistent, the inner world no longer reacts to subtle changes in sensation or thought. What once might have drawn attention now passes without significance. Nothing asks to be followed. Nothing asks to be resolved. Resolution has already happened through stability. Psalm 91 speaks of remaining sheltered without needing to look outward. Looking outward implies expectation. Expectation implies uncertainty. Here, uncertainty has no role. As time continues, the body maintains its ease without correction. There is no signal asking for adjustment. Muscles rest because they are no longer preparing for response. The body recognizes this space as sufficient. Sufficiency quiets effort. The mind reflects this same sufficiency. Thoughts arise gently and dissolve before forming direction. They do not gather momentum. They do not create narrative. Narrative belongs to movement. Movement is absent. As the words continue, they remain unchanged, predictable, and even. This consistency allows the nervous system to stay disengaged from alertness. Nothing new requires interpretation. Interpretation has softened. Psalm 91 describes a covering that does not fluctuate with attention. It remains when awareness is present and when it drifts. It remains during rest and during wakefulness. This constancy teaches the deepest layers that nothing needs to be guarded. As minutes pass, the sense of internal effort becomes increasingly distant. There is no sense of holding the state in place. The state holds itself. Self-sustaining environments do not need participation. The unseen pressures that once depended on participation cannot exist here. They required reaction, engagement, and response. None of these are active. As familiarity deepens, the inner world stops distinguishing between inner and outer quiet. Both are received without hierarchy. Both are allowed without preference. Preference dissolves. Psalm 91 speaks of dwelling as a condition that continues beyond awareness. Dwelling does not end when attention shifts. It remains because it has become context. Context does not require reinforcement. As the duration continues, the words feel lighter, less directive, more atmospheric. They are no longer something to listen to. They are something that exists alongside the quiet. Atmosphere does not instruct. It surrounds. Allow the time to continue passing without marking it. Allow the quiet to remain without noticing it. Allow the state to sustain itself without engagement. Nothing needs to be completed. Nothing needs to arrive. Nothing needs to change. The refuge remains, and the stillness continues, steady, familiar, and uninterrupted, as time moves on without demand. As the quiet remains unchanged, the inner world no longer treats stillness as something special. It is no longer an experience to enter. It is simply the ground beneath everything else. Ground does not move. Ground does not respond. Ground holds without effort. Psalm 91 speaks of dwelling in a place that does not shift with circumstance. This dwelling does not require awareness to stay active. It remains whether it is noticed or not. As time continues, the body stays settled without instruction. There is no subtle readiness waiting beneath the surface, no tension preparing to respond. The body rests because nothing is asking it to do otherwise. Rest here is not collapse, it is stability. The mind mirrors this stability. Thoughts may arise softly and pass without gathering weight. They do not invite engagement. They do not pull attention. They dissolve as naturally as they appear. Engagement has no role here. As the words continue, they remain consistent and even. This sameness is intentional. It teaches the nervous system that nothing new is required. Novelty would invite alertness. Alertness has ended. Psalm 91 describes protection that surrounds rather than intervenes. Surrounding does not act. It simply remains present in every direction, unchanged by time or awareness. As minutes pass, the sense of internal boundaries softens further. There is no edge where attention must stay. Awareness is free to rest without anchoring itself. This freedom does not create drift, it creates ease. The unseen pressures that once relied on contraction and response cannot exist in this openness. They needed resistance. Resistance is absent. As familiarity deepens, the inner world stops referencing past states entirely. There is no memory required to confirm peace. Peace stands without comparison. Comparison dissolves. Psalm 91 speaks of remaining through unseen hours. Hours when nothing is tracked. Hours when awareness drifts naturally. The environment remains intact through all of them. As the duration continues, the experience does not thin or fade. Depth remains because nothing interrupts it. Interruption was the only thing that ever reduced depth. Interruption is absent. Allow the time to pass without marking it. Allow the quiet to remain without noticing it. Allow the state to sustain itself without interference. Nothing needs to change. Nothing needs to resolve. Nothing needs to conclude. The refuge remains, and the stillness continues, steady, familiar, and uninterrupted, as time moves quietly onward. As the environment remains steady, the inner world no longer reacts even to the idea of rest. Rest has become so familiar that it no longer feels like a state. It feels like neutrality that supports everything else quietly. Neutrality does not draw attention. It does not announce itself. It holds. Psalm 91 speaks of a dwelling place that remains when awareness fades and returns. This dwelling is not sustained by focus or intention. It remains because it has become internal structure rather than temporary experience. As time continues, the body settles into this structure without effort. There is no sense of holding yourself together. Nothing is being maintained. Muscles remain at ease because there is nothing to brace against. Bracing belonged to anticipation. Anticipation is absent. The mind follows this same quiet pattern. Thoughts arise softly and pass without forming sequences. They do not pull attention forward. They do not invite interpretation. Interpretation has no function here. As the words continue, they remain gentle and unchanged. This consistency allows the nervous system to remain disengaged from alertness. Nothing new requires evaluation. Nothing unexpected needs to be met. Psalm 91 describes protection that does not fluctuate with awareness. It remains whether it is noticed or ignored. This teaches the deepest layers that safety is not conditional. As minutes pass, awareness may feel wide, soft, or distant. This is not loss. It is release from the need to anchor attention anywhere. Anchoring belonged to effort. Effort has ended. The unseen pressures that once relied on effort cannot exist in this environment. They required reaction and response. Reaction has dissolved. As familiarity deepens, the inner world stops checking itself entirely. There is no sense of how am I doing? That question no longer arises. Relevance has dissolved. Psalm 91 speaks of remaining through unseen hours. Hours when nothing is monitored. Hours when rest deepens naturally. The environment remains intact through all of them. As the duration continues, the words feel lighter, more atmospheric. They no longer feel like guidance. They feel like part of the quiet itself. Atmosphere does not instruct, it surrounds. Allow the time to continue passing without marking it. Allow the quiet to remain without noticing it. Allow the state to sustain itself naturally. Nothing needs to be completed. Nothing needs to arrive. Nothing needs to change. The refuge remains, and the stillness continues, calm, familiar, and uninterrupted as time moves on without demand. As the quiet remains uninterrupted, the inner world no longer treats silence as something to enter or leave. Silence has become the condition beneath everything else, not an experience layered on top of activity. Conditions do not come and go, they remain. Psalm 91 speaks of a dwelling that is not affected by movement, time, or attention. This dwelling does not ask to be protected. It protects by existing. As this understanding settles, the system stops preparing for disturbance. Preparation dissolves quietly. As time continues, the body remains supported without instruction. There is no subtle tightening beneath the surface, no readiness forming. The body rests because there is nothing to brace against. Rest here is unremarkable. Unremarkable rest is the deepest kind. The mind follows this same pattern. Thoughts may appear briefly, but they do not gather energy. They do not pull awareness. They do not demand response. Response is unnecessary. As the words continue, they remain even and predictable. Predictability is not monotony here. It is reassurance without words. It allows the nervous system to remain disengaged from alertness. Alertness has no role in this environment. Psalm 91 describes protection that surrounds rather than intervenes. Surrounding does not act. It simply remains present, unchanged, in every direction. As minutes pass, the sense of internal effort becomes increasingly distant. There is no sense of holding the state together. The state holds itself. Self-sustaining environments do not require participation. The unseen pressures that once depended on participation cannot exist here. They relied on reaction, engagement, and response. None of these are active. As familiarity deepens, the inner world stops distinguishing between inner and outer quiet. Both are received without hierarchy. Both are allowed without preference. Preference dissolves. Psalm 91 speaks of remaining through unseen hours. Hours when nothing is monitored. Hours when awareness drifts without consequence. The environment remains intact through all of them. As the duration continues, the words feel lighter, less directive, more atmospheric. They are no longer something to listen to. They are something that exists alongside the quiet. Atmosphere does not instruct, it surrounds. Allow the time to continue passing without marking it. Allow the quiet to remain without noticing it. Allow the state to sustain itself without engagement. Nothing needs to be completed. Nothing needs to arrive. Nothing needs to change. The refuge remains, and the stillness continues, steady, familiar, and uninterrupted as time moves quietly onward. As the environment remains exactly as it is, the inner world no longer reacts even to subtle fluctuations of awareness. Whether attention feels close or distant, nothing changes. The state does not depend on clarity. It does not depend on restfulness. It remains because it has become foundational. Foundations do not shift with movement above them. Psalm 91 speaks of a dwelling that remains when activity rises and when it falls away. This dwelling does not thin when life resumes. It does not weaken when attention moves outward. It continues quietly beneath everything else. As time continues, the body no longer carries residual signals of readiness. There is no underlying tension waiting to respond. The body has learned that response is unnecessary here. Learning has completed itself. The mind reflects this same completion. Thoughts may pass gently, but they do not form threads. There is no pull toward past or future. The present does not need to be held. It holds itself. Holding without effort is stability. As the words continue, they do not introduce direction. They do not suggest movement. They exist as part of the environment, not as guidance. Guidance would imply a place to go. There is nowhere to go. Psalm 91 describes protection that is not reactive. It does not respond to threat because threat does not organize the environment. Protection exists first. Everything else is secondary. As minutes pass, the sense of internal borders softens further. There is no line between listening and resting. Both merge into the same condition. The system does not distinguish between them anymore. Distinction dissolves. The unseen pressures that once relied on distinction between calm and disturbance, between safety and threat, cannot operate here. They required edges. Edges are no longer present. As familiarity deepens, the inner world stops forming expectations entirely. There is no sense that something should continue or conclude. The experience is sufficient as it is. Sufficiency quiets desire. Psalm 91 speaks of remaining through unseen hours, through moments when nothing is observed and nothing is tracked. The environment remains intact through all of them, unchanged and unchallenged. As the duration continues, the words become increasingly transparent. They do not draw attention, they blend into the quiet. Language loses its weight and becomes atmosphere. Atmosphere does not require participation. It surrounds without asking. Allow the time to pass without marking it. Allow the quiet to remain without noticing it. Allow the state to sustain itself naturally. Nothing needs to be completed. Nothing needs to be remembered. Nothing needs to resolve. The refuge remains, and the stillness continues, calm, familiar, and uninterrupted, as time moves on without demand. As the quiet remains unchanged, the inner world no longer treats awareness as something that needs to stay present. Presence is no longer an action. It is simply the condition that remains when nothing pulls attention away. Nothing is pulling now. Psalm 91 speaks of a dwelling that does not depend on vigilance. It does not require the mind to stay alert or the body to stay ready. It remains because it has become internal structure, not external shelter. As time continues, the body remains supported without sensation drawing notice. There is no subtle alertness under the surface, no readiness waiting to be triggered. The body rests because it recognizes that nothing is approaching. Recognition has settled. The mind mirrors this recognition. Thoughts appear briefly and dissolve without forming direction. They do not gather meaning. They do not call attention. Attention is free to rest. As the words continue, they remain even and unchanging. This sameness allows the nervous system to remain disengaged from response. Nothing new requires interpretation. Nothing unexpected invites reaction. Reaction has ended. Psalm 91 describes protection that surrounds rather than interrupts. Surrounding does not move. It does not intervene. It simply remains present, constant and reliable. As minutes pass, the sense of inner effort becomes almost unrecognizable. There is no feeling of holding anything together. The environment holds itself. Self-holding environments do not require maintenance. The unseen pressures that once relied on maintenance cannot exist here. They depended on effort and reaction. Both have dissolved. As familiarity deepens, the inner world no longer references time. There is no sense of how long this has lasted or how long it will continue. Time loses relevance when nothing is changing. Change is unnecessary. Psalm 91 speaks of remaining through unseen hours, hours when awareness drifts, hours when rest deepens naturally. The environment remains intact through all of them, unchanged by attention. As the duration continues, the words feel less like language and more like quiet presence. They no longer invite listening. They simply exist alongside the stillness. Presence does not instruct, it remains. Allow the time to continue passing without marking it. Allow the quiet to remain without noticing it. Allow the state to sustain itself without interference. Nothing needs to conclude. Nothing needs to arrive. Nothing needs to resolve. The refuge remains. And the stillness continues, steady, familiar, and uninterrupted as time moves on without demand. As the environment remains steady, the inner world no longer assigns meaning to subtle shifts in sensation. Whether there is warmth or coolness, quiet or distant sound, nothing needs interpretation. Interpretation belonged to vigilance. Vigilance is no longer active. Psalm 91 speaks of remaining sheltered without watching the perimeter. When there is no perimeter to watch, the system releases its last subtle habits of scanning. Scanning fades because there is nothing to detect. As time continues, the body rests without sinking or drifting. It remains supported in a balanced way, neither tense nor collapsed. This balance feels natural because it is no longer maintained by effort. Effort has no role here. The mind follows this same simplicity. Thoughts arise lightly and pass without forming threads. They do not lead anywhere. They do not require response. They do not linger. Lingering required engagement. Engagement has softened. As the words continue, they do not guide attention forward or inward. They exist as part of the atmosphere, not as instruction. Atmosphere does not ask to be followed. Psalm 91 describes protection that remains consistent across changing conditions. This consistency teaches the deeper layers that safety does not depend on constant awareness. It remains whether it is noticed or not. As minutes pass, the sense of inner boundaries becomes almost transparent. There is no clear line between inside and outside, between awareness and rest. Everything is received evenly, without preference. Preference dissolves quietly. The unseen pressures that once relied on preference, choosing calm over tension, safety over threat, cannot exist here. Choice implies conflict. Conflict is absent. As familiarity deepens, the inner world stops relating to experience as something personal. Experience becomes neutral, spacious, and shared by the environment rather than owned by the self. Ownership dissolves. Psalm 91 speaks of dwelling through unseen hours when nothing is tracked and nothing is measured. The environment remains intact through all of them, unchanged by attention. As the duration continues, the words become increasingly light, almost transparent. They do not interrupt the quiet, they blend into it. Quiet does not need reinforcement, it sustains itself. Allow the time to continue passing without marking it. Allow the stillness to remain without noticing it. Allow the state to carry itself forward naturally. Nothing needs to be completed. Nothing needs to be remembered. Nothing needs to resolve. The refuge remains, and the calm continues, stable, familiar, and uninterrupted, as time moves gently onward. As the quiet remains unchanged, the inner world no longer responds to the idea of duration. Whether moments pass slowly or quickly, no longer matters. Time is no longer something to move through. It is simply present, without demand. Presence does not measure itself. It does not track progress. It does not anticipate conclusion. Psalm 91 speaks of a dwelling that remains when nothing is observed. When there is no observation, the system releases the last traces of self-monitoring. Self-monitoring belonged to effort. Effort has dissolved. As time continues, the body rests in a way that feels almost invisible. Support does not call attention to itself. There is no sensation asking to be adjusted, no signal requesting response. The body remains because nothing is interrupting it. Interruption is absent. The mind follows this same pattern. Thoughts may appear softly and fade without consequence. They do not connect. They do not organize. They do not request meaning. Meaning-making is unnecessary here. As the words continue, they remain steady and predictable. This steadiness allows the nervous system to stay disengaged from alertness. Nothing new arrives. Nothing unexpected needs to be met. Psalm 91 describes protection that does not react to circumstances. It exists before anything else appears. Everything else adjusts around it. As minutes pass, the sense of internal orientation softens. There is no forward or backward pull. Awareness does not lean toward past or future. It remains evenly distributed without preference. Preference dissolves. The unseen pressures that once relied on orientation toward threat, toward anticipation, toward readiness cannot operate here. Orientation has no function when nothing is approaching. As familiarity deepens, the inner world stops relating to the experience as something temporary. There is no sense that this state needs to be held onto. Holding implies fear of loss. Loss is not expected. Expectation has ended. Psalm 91 speaks of remaining through unseen hours, through moments when nothing is noticed and nothing is checked. The environment remains intact through all of them, unchanged and reliable. As the duration continues, the words feel increasingly like part of the quiet itself. They do not interrupt, they do not direct. They simply exist alongside what is already present. Existence does not instruct, it allows. Allow the time to pass without marking it. Allow the quiet to remain without noticing it. Allow the state to sustain itself without engagement. Nothing needs to arrive. Nothing needs to resolve. Nothing needs to conclude. The refuge remains, and the stillness continues, steady, familiar, and uninterrupted, as time moves on without demand. As the quiet remains consistent, the inner world no longer relates to silence as something that could be interrupted. Silence is no longer a gap between thoughts or a pause between moments. It has become the underlying condition that everything else rests upon. Conditions do not require attention. They remain whether they are noticed or not. Psalm 91 speaks of dwelling without awareness of dwelling. When something is truly inhabited, it no longer feels like a place you are in. It feels like the ground you stand on, unnoticed and reliable. As time continues, the body remains settled without any signal to adjust. There is no subtle tightening, no micro movements preparing for response. The body rests because it has learned there is nothing to respond to. Learning does not announce itself. It settles quietly. The mind reflects this same learning. Thoughts may appear briefly, but they do not pull awareness. They do not form direction. They do not create momentum. They dissolve without leaving a trace. Momentum has no role here. As the words continue, they remain even and unobtrusive. They do not compete with the quiet. They do not ask to be followed. They exist as part of the atmosphere, not as guidance. Atmosphere does not instruct, it surrounds. Psalm 91 describes protection that is present before any movement begins. It does not arrive in response to threat. It remains constant, making threat irrelevant. As minutes pass, the sense of inner effort fades almost completely. There is no feeling of maintaining a state. The state maintains itself. Nothing inside is working to keep anything in place. Work has ended. The unseen pressures that once relied on work, attention, or response cannot exist here. They required engagement. Engagement has softened into neutrality. As familiarity deepens, the inner world stops relating to experience as something that needs to be held onto. There is no fear of losing this state because there is no sense that it could leave. Loss is not anticipated. Psalm 91 speaks of remaining through unseen hours when nothing is tracked and nothing is measured. The environment remains intact through all of them, unchanged by attention or time. As the duration continues, the words become increasingly transparent. They do not interrupt the stillness. They blend into it, like background light that does not draw focus. Background light does not demand awareness. It supports quietly, Allow the time to continue passing without marking it. Allow the quiet to remain without noticing it. Allow the state to carry itself forward naturally. Nothing needs to be completed. Nothing needs to be remembered. Nothing needs to resolve. The refuge remains, and the calm continues, steady, familiar, and uninterrupted as time moves gently onward. As the quiet remains unchanged, the inner world no longer experiences stillness as something separate from everyday existence. Stillness is no longer an event. It is the background condition that remains whether attention is present or absent. Background conditions do not fluctuate. They do not demand maintenance. They simply hold. Psalm 91 speaks of dwelling in a place that remains even when awareness moves elsewhere. This dwelling does not require remembrance. It does not weaken when attention shifts outward. It continues beneath everything else. As time continues, the body remains at ease without awareness needing to guide it. There is no impulse to adjust, no signal asking for correction. The body has settled into a state where readiness is unnecessary. Readiness has no function here. The mind follows this same quiet pattern. Thoughts may surface gently, but they do not organize themselves into direction. They pass without forming meaning or urgency. Urgency has dissolved. As the words continue, they remain steady and unobtrusive. They do not introduce new ideas. They do not redirect attention. They exist as part of the environment, not as instruction. Instruction would imply movement. Movement has ended. Psalm 91 describes protection that surrounds rather than reacts. Surrounding does not respond to threat. It exists first, making threat irrelevant. As minutes pass, the sense of inner tension becomes increasingly distant. There is no subtle pressure waiting to be released. What once felt like background weight no longer participates in the experience. Participation has ended. The unseen pressures that relied on participation cannot exist here. They depended on response, engagement, and reaction. None of these are present. As familiarity deepens, the inner world stops relating to experience as something temporary. There is no sense that this state needs to be preserved. Preservation implies fear of loss. Fear is absent. Psalm 91 speaks of remaining through unseen hours, when nothing is checked and nothing is tracked. The environment remains intact through all of them, unchanged by awareness or time. As the duration continues, the words become lighter, more transparent. They no longer draw attention. They blend into the quiet, supporting without interruption. Quiet does not need reinforcement. It sustains itself. Allow the time to continue passing without marking it. Allow the stillness to remain without noticing it. Allow the state to carry itself forward naturally. Nothing needs to arrive. Nothing needs to resolve. Nothing needs to conclude. The refuge remains, and the stillness continues, calm, familiar, and uninterrupted as time moves on without demand. As the quiet remains steady, the inner world no longer notices the absence of disturbance. What once might have been felt as relief is no longer contrasted with tension. Relief has become unnecessary as a concept. There is simply steadiness. Steadiness does not announce itself. It does not arrive. It does not depart. Psalm 91 speaks of a dwelling that remains without needing to be reinforced by experience. When something is truly dwelt in, it no longer feels like a refuge you enter. It feels like the ground beneath you, present before any movement begins. As time continues, the body remains settled without any internal signal calling for adjustment. There is no underlying readiness, no posture of defense. The body has learned that nothing requires response. Learning has completed its work. The mind reflects this same completion. Thoughts may pass softly, but they do not gather into themes. They do not create direction. They dissolve before becoming relevant. Relevance has softened. As the words continue, they remain gentle and consistent. They do not guide attention forward. They do not invite effort. They exist as part of the atmosphere, not as instruction. Atmosphere does not ask to be followed. It surrounds. Psalm 91 describes protection that does not depend on awareness. It remains during clarity and during drift. It remains during rest and during wakefulness. This constancy teaches the deepest layers that nothing needs to be guarded. Guarding has ended. As minutes pass, the sense of internal structure becomes increasingly quiet. There is no feeling of holding anything together. The state holds itself without assistance. Self-sustaining states do not require engagement. The unseen pressures that once relied on engagement cannot exist here. They depended on reaction, anticipation, and response. None of these are active. As familiarity deepens, the inner world no longer distinguishes between presence and absence. Both feel the same. Both are supported equally. Distinction dissolves. Psalm 91 speaks of remaining through unseen hours, when nothing is observed and nothing is tracked. The environment remains intact through all of them, unchanged and reliable. As the duration continues, the words become increasingly transparent. They no longer interrupt the quiet. They blend into it, like light that does not draw focus. Light does not demand attention. It supports quietly. Allow the time to continue passing without marking it. Allow the stillness to remain without noticing it. Allow the state to carry itself forward naturally. Nothing needs to be completed. Nothing needs to be remembered. Nothing needs to resolve. The refuge remains, and the calm continues, steady, familiar, and uninterrupted, as time moves gently onward. As the quiet remains consistent, the inner world no longer reacts to subtle internal movements. Sensations arise and pass without interpretation. There is no impulse to follow them, no need to label or understand them. Understanding is unnecessary when stability is already present. Stability does not ask questions. It answers them by remaining. Psalm 91 speaks of a dwelling that is not affected by what passes through awareness. Thoughts, sensations, and sounds move freely without disturbing what surrounds them. The environment remains intact regardless of what appears within it. As time continues, the body rests without any sense of holding itself in place. There is no posture to maintain, no balance to correct. Gravity feels cooperative rather than demanding. Support is constant. The mind mirrors this ease. Thoughts do not linger. They do not form chains. They dissolve before they can organize attention. Organization has ended. As the words continue, they do not draw attention to themselves. They exist as part of the atmosphere, not as content to follow. The voice does not lead forward. It remains alongside the quiet. Remaining is enough. Psalm 91 describes protection that does not fluctuate with circumstance. It does not grow stronger or weaker. It simply exists, making circumstance secondary. As minutes pass, the sense of internal effort becomes almost imperceptible. There is no feeling of sustaining anything. The state sustains itself without participation. Participation would imply effort. Effort has dissolved. The unseen pressures that once relied on effort cannot exist here. They depended on engagement and response. Without these, they lose relevance entirely. As familiarity deepens, the inner world no longer distinguishes between this moment and the next. There is no sense of transition. Time flows without marking change. Change is unnecessary. Psalm 91 speaks of remaining through unseen hours, through moments when awareness drifts naturally and returns without consequence. The environment remains intact through all of them. As the duration continues, the words become increasingly subtle. They blend into the stillness, supporting without interruption. Language loses its weight and becomes presence. Presence does not instruct, it allows. Allow the time to continue passing without marking it. Allow the quiet to remain without noticing it. Allow the state to carry itself forward naturally. Nothing needs to arrive. Nothing needs to resolve, nothing needs to conclude. The refuge remains, and the stillness continues, calm, familiar, and uninterrupted, as time moves quietly onward. As the quiet remains steady, the inner world no longer experiences the need to settle. Settling has already occurred. What remains now is not a process, but a condition that supports everything else without effort. Conditions do not progress, they remain. Psalm 91 speaks of a dwelling that is not influenced by what passes through awareness. Thoughts, sensations, and sounds may come and go, but they do not organize the space they move within. The space remains unchanged. As time continues, the body rests in a way that feels completely ordinary. There is no sense of deep rest to notice, no contrast to mark. Ordinariness here is not dullness. It is stability that no longer needs to be acknowledged. Acknowledgement would imply effort. Effort is absent. The mind follows this same simplicity. Thoughts may arise briefly and fade without consequence. They do not request attention. They do not create momentum. Momentum has no place here. As the words continue, they do not guide attention or invite reflection. They exist as part of the environment, not as instruction. The environment does not need to be followed. Psalm 91 describes protection that does not react to threat. It exists before threat is perceived, rendering reaction unnecessary. This pre-existence is what allows the deepest layers to rest. As minutes pass, the sense of internal boundaries softens further. There is no clear separation between awareness and rest. Both are supported equally without hierarchy. Hierarchy dissolves. The unseen pressures that once relied on hierarchy, choosing safety over danger, calm over tension, cannot operate here. Choice implies conflict. Conflict is absent. As familiarity deepens, the inner world stops relating to experience as something temporary. There is no sense that this state must be preserved. Preservation implies fear of loss. Loss is not anticipated. Psalm 91 speaks of remaining through unseen hours when nothing is monitored and nothing is measured. The environment remains intact through all of them, unchanged by attention or time. As the duration continues, the words become increasingly transparent. They no longer interrupt the stillness. They blend into it, like light that supports without drawing focus. Support does not announce itself, it simply holds. Allow the time to continue passing without marking it. Allow the quiet to remain without noticing it. Allow the state to carry itself forward naturally. Nothing needs to be completed. Nothing needs to be remembered. Nothing needs to resolve. The refuge remains, and the calm continues, steady, familiar, and uninterrupted, as time moves gently onward. As the quiet remains unchanged, the inner world no longer experiences rest as something that could deepen or fade. Rest is no longer measured. It simply exists as the underlying condition that holds everything else. When something no longer needs to be measured, it no longer needs to be protected. Psalm 91 speaks of a dwelling that remains even when nothing is being noticed. When awareness drifts, the environment does not weaken. When attention returns, nothing needs to be restored. This constancy teaches the deepest layers that safety does not depend on effort. As time continues, the body remains at ease without instruction. There is no subtle signal asking for correction, no impulse to adjust or respond. The body has learned that there is nothing to respond to. Learning completes quietly. The mind follows this same completion. Thoughts arise gently and dissolve without forming direction. They do not gather meaning. They do not create urgency. They pass without leaving a trace. Trace has no role here. As the words continue, they do not guide or instruct. They exist as part of the environment, not as something to follow. The environment does not require participation to remain active. Psalm 91 describes protection that surrounds rather than intervenes. Surrounding does not act. It remains present, unchanged in every direction. As minutes pass, the sense of internal effort fades completely. There is no feeling of holding anything together. The state sustains itself without awareness. Self-sustaining states do not require engagement. The unseen pressures that once relied on engagement cannot exist here. They depended on reaction, anticipation, and response. None of these are active. As familiarity deepens, the inner world stops distinguishing between presence and absence. Both are supported equally. There is no preference. There is no hierarchy. Hierarchy dissolves. Psalm 91 speaks of remaining through unseen hours, when nothing is monitored and nothing is tracked. The environment remains intact through all of them, unchanged and reliable. As the duration continues, the words become almost transparent. They do not interrupt the quiet. They blend into it, like background light that supports without drawing attention. Background light does not demand awareness, it simply remains. Allow the time to continue passing without marking it. Allow the stillness to remain without noticing it. Allow the state to carry itself forward naturally. Nothing needs to arrive. Nothing needs to resolve. Nothing needs to conclude. The refuge remains, and the calm continues, steady, familiar, and uninterrupted, as time moves on without demand. There is no longer a need to describe what this space is like, because it has already been felt. When something has been felt long enough, explanation becomes unnecessary. The system recognizes it without language. What matters now is not awareness of the state, but how the state quietly reshapes what follows. Thoughts, when they appear, no longer try to orient themselves around threat or urgency. They move without seeking direction. This absence of direction is not confusion. It is freedom from having to prepare. Preparation was once constant, not dramatic, not conscious, just present in the background. The readiness to respond, to anticipate, to manage. Here, that background readiness has thinned to the point of irrelevance. Without readiness, the inner world becomes structurally lighter. Psalm 91 does not speak of safety as something that must be renewed. It speaks of safety as something that remains whether or not it is acknowledged. When this idea settles deeply, the nervous system stops rechecking the environment. Rechecking dissolves quietly. The body mirrors this change without instruction. Muscles remain at ease, not because they are told to relax, but because there is no longer a signal asking them to tighten. The absence of signal becomes the new normal. Normal is powerful. What feels normal no longer draws attention, and what no longer draws attention stops shaping behavior. This is how old internal patterns lose influence, not through interruption, but through irrelevance. As time continues, the experience does not feel like something unfolding. It feels like something that has already unfolded and is now simply present. Presence does not move forward. It does not loop backward. It remains. What remains now is not the awareness of being protected, but the quiet reorganization that happens when protection is no longer questioned. The mind does not announce this change. It simply stops arranging thoughts around the possibility of disruption. Thoughts still appear, but they no longer search for exits, explanations, or defenses. They move through the inner space without urgency, as if they have nothing to prove. This shift does not feel dramatic because it is not emotional. It is structural. Structure changes quietly, without sensation. When structure changes, behavior follows later, often without being noticed. This is why the most enduring forms of peace rarely feel intense. They feel ordinary, almost unremarkable, yet unmistakably stable. The nervous system responds to this stability by releasing its background habits. Habits of readiness, habits of anticipation, habits of subtle control. These habits were never loud. They were never chosen consciously. They existed as default responses to an environment that once felt unpredictable. Here, unpredictability no longer organizes perception. Without unpredictability, the system does not scan. Without scanning, it does not prepare. Without preparation, it rests. Rest here is not collapse. It is equilibrium. The body remains present, supported, and grounded without effort. There is no sense of drifting away, no loss of clarity that needs to be corrected. Everything is exactly as it needs to be, without adjustment. Time continues to pass, but it is no longer experienced as something moving forward. There is no internal narrative tracking how long this has lasted or how much remains. Duration loses relevance when nothing is changing. When nothing is changing, there is nothing to measure. This is why long periods begin to feel effortless. As the experience continues, the mind stops revisiting older reference points. It no longer checks how this compares to earlier states. Comparison dissolves when there is nothing to compare against. What is present stands on its own, without contrast. This absence of contrast is what weakens old patterns. Patterns survive on difference, tension followed by relief, alertness followed by rest. Here there is no swing, there is consistency. Consistency does not feed repetition. It starves it quietly. The body understands this before the mind does. Muscles no longer carry residual signals of defense. There is no subtle holding in the jaw, the shoulders, the chest. Not because these areas are being relaxed deliberately, but because there is no longer a signal instructing them to tighten. The absence of instruction becomes the new baseline. Baseline matters. What becomes baseline stops being questioned. And what stops being questioned stops shaping behavior. This is how internal cycles end without confrontation. They simply lose relevance in a system that no longer responds to them. The experience continues without asking anything from you. There is no invitation to focus, no suggestion to let go, no request to participate. Participation would imply effort, and effort is unnecessary here. Everything that needed effort has already completed its role. As moments pass, awareness may feel closer or more distant. Sometimes it feels like listening, sometimes like resting. These distinctions no longer matter. Both states support the same continuity. Nothing changes when awareness shifts. This is integration. Integrated states do not depend on attention. They remain active in the background of experience, shaping how everything else unfolds without needing to be reinforced. The mind begins to function differently within this integration. Decisions, when they arise later, feel simpler. Reactions feel slower. Not because something is being suppressed, but because there is more space before response. Space interrupts automatic patterns. Space weakens urgency. Urgency cannot survive where there is space. As time continues, the sense of inner pressure becomes increasingly abstract, almost theoretical. It is remembered as something that once existed, not something that could return. The body no longer expects it. Expectation was the last anchor holding it in place. When expectation dissolves, the pattern ends. Nothing announces this ending. There is no internal signal saying, "This is over." The absence of signal is the completion. Completion here is silent and final. The experience does not move toward a conclusion. It settles deeper into continuity. Continuity is what allows this state to remain accessible beyond the words, beyond the sound, beyond this moment. It becomes something you carry without realizing you are carrying it. Carried states feel light. They do not draw attention. They do not demand protection. They do not need to be remembered. They simply remain. What becomes clear with more time is that nothing here is being sustained by intention. Intention once had a role, but that role has already been fulfilled. What remains now does not respond to effort or direction. It responds only to consistency, and consistency has already been established. The mind no longer organizes itself around the need to maintain this state. Maintenance would imply fragility. There is no fragility here. What exists is not delicate. It does not require protection. It remains because nothing is challenging it. This is why the experience feels increasingly neutral rather than intense. Intensity belongs to transition. Neutrality belongs to stability. Stability is what allows the deepest systems to disengage from effort completely. As the minutes extend, the inner world begins to operate without internal commentary. There is no narration explaining what is happening, no voice evaluating progress, no subtle comparison between now and before. Commentary dissolves when there is nothing to manage. Management has ended. Without management, the nervous system no longer cycles through readiness and release. It stays in equilibrium. Equilibrium is not passive. It is active balance without strain. The body remains present and supported, not drifting, not collapsing, simply existing without resistance. This balance changes how time is perceived. Time no longer feels like something passing. It feels like a container that holds experience without moving. When time stops being a factor, urgency has nowhere to exist. Urgency dissolves quietly. Thoughts still appear occasionally, but they no longer arrive with weight. They do not seek resolution. They do not demand response. They pass as if they recognize they are not needed here. Recognition is enough to soften them. The absence of response is not suppression. It is irrelevance. Irrelevant patterns do not return. As the experience continues, the inner world stops preparing for what comes after. There is no sense of later forming beneath the surface. Later implied responsibility. Responsibility implied pressure. Pressure no longer organizes perception. When pressure leaves, space opens. Space does not rush to be filled. It does not invite content. It simply exists. Within this space, even subtle emotional echoes lose coherence. They do not escalate. They do not repeat. They fade because there is no structure to hold them in place. Structure has shifted. Structure now supports rest. This support is not something you feel. It is something you stop noticing. What you stop noticing has become normal. Normality is the deepest sign of integration. As the block continues, the words do not guide you anywhere. They are not leading toward insight or resolution. They are simply present, moving alongside the experience without shaping it. Shaping would imply direction. Direction is unnecessary. The mind adapts to this lack of direction by releasing its habit of searching. Searching once felt automatic. It was always looking for what to do next, what to understand next, what to resolve next. Here, there is nothing next. Next dissolves. Without next, the present does not need to be held. It holds itself. The experience becomes self-contained, complete without closure. Closure belongs to endings. This is not ending, this is settling. Settled states do not announce themselves. They become the background against which everything else eventually unfolds. This is why their influence lasts beyond the moment. As time continues, the body mirrors this settlement by remaining steady without conscious control. Breathing continues without notice. Posture remains without adjustment. The absence of correction is the sign that nothing is wrong. Nothing is wrong. This understanding does not appear as a thought. It appears as silence. Silence that does not feel empty. Silence that feels sufficient. Sufficiency removes striving. Without striving, there is nothing to interrupt the continuity. Continuity is what carries this state forward, beyond this moment, beyond this session, into whatever follows naturally. The experience does not end. It does not pause. It simply remains available, unchanged, whenever it is encountered again. Availability does not need to be remembered. It reveals itself through familiarity, and familiarity does not ask for attention. What begins to take shape now is not a new sensation, but a quiet recalibration of how the inner world relates to absence. Absence of threat, absence of urgency, absence of the subtle pressure that once organized attention without ever announcing itself. When that pressure is gone, something unexpected happens. The mind no longer needs to rest. Rest implies recovery. What is present now does not feel like recovery. It feels like neutrality that never left. Neutrality is stable because it does not swing. This stability changes the way thoughts behave. They no longer arrive with momentum. They do not build toward conclusions. They appear pass and dissolve without leaving residue. Residue was what once created repetition. Repetition no longer has material to work with. As the minutes extend, the sense of inner pacing disappears. There is no internal clock checking progress, no awareness of how far along this is. Pacing was a response to pressure. Without pressure, pacing becomes irrelevant. Irrelevance is quiet power. The body reflects this irrelevance by staying exactly where it is without adjustment. There is no signal to shift, no need to correct posture or breath. Everything that is happening is sufficient. Sufficiency removes the need to intervene. Intervention is no longer expected. This absence of expectation allows deeper layers to disengage. Layers that once stayed partially alert, even during rest, now release completely. Not dramatically, not all at once, but permanently. Permanent changes are subtle. They do not feel like breakthroughs. They feel like, this is just how it is now. And that is how old internal cycles end. Not by being broken, but by becoming incompatible with the new structure. Cycles require engagement. Engagement no longer occurs. As this continues, awareness becomes less centered on any single point. There is no focal effort. Attention spreads naturally, without losing coherence. This is not distraction. It is spaciousness without fragmentation. Fragmentation required urgency. Urgency has no place here. Thoughts that once circled familiar themes now lose their orbit. They drift without returning. Orbit depended on gravity. Gravity depended on pressure. Pressure is gone. Gone does not mean fought. Gone means unnecessary. The experience continues without signaling milestones. There is no sense of reaching a midpoint. No internal marker saying, something has happened. This lack of markers is intentional. Markers pull attention out of continuity. Continuity is the work. Within this continuity, the nervous system begins to treat this state as default rather than exception. Defaults shape behavior long after the moment ends. This is how the effect carries forward into daily life without being remembered. Remembering is not required. Later, when decisions arise, they may feel quieter. When situations appear, they may feel less charged. Not because you are trying to stay calm, but because calm is no longer something you need to maintain. Maintenance has ended. The experience does not need reinforcement. It does not need repetition. It does not need explanation. It simply continues doing what it has already done, reshaping the background conditions that once allowed pressure to exist. Background conditions matter more than surface events. As the block continues, nothing new is introduced. No new idea, no new direction, no new demand. This sameness is not stagnation. It is integration completing itself. Integration does not announce completion. It reveals itself through absence of strain. And strain is absent. What gradually becomes evident is that the absence of pressure does not create emptiness. It creates clarity without effort, clarity that does not need to be held or protected. It simply remains present as part of how the inner world now operates. This clarity does not announce itself as insight. It shows itself through how little explanation is needed. Situations no longer require internal narration. Thoughts do not need to justify themselves. Feelings do not need to be interpreted. Interpretation once served survival. Survival mode is no longer active. As this continues, the mind begins to function without its former background noise. Not silence in the dramatic sense, but the quiet that comes when nothing is being rehearsed. No rehearsing of conversations, no rehearsing of outcomes, no rehearsing of defense. Rehearsal depended on uncertainty. Without uncertainty, rehearsal dissolves. The body mirrors this shift by remaining steady across longer stretches of time. There is no impulse to check how it feels, no internal scan asking whether something has changed. Change is no longer relevant. Relevance has shifted. What matters now is not what is happening internally, but how little effort it takes for things to remain stable. Stability has become self-sustaining. It does not require reinforcement. This is where deeper patterns begin to weaken permanently. Patterns that relied on subtle activation, small signals, tiny shifts, internal alarms, no longer receive the response they need to survive. Without response, patterns fade. They do not collapse, they do not break, they simply stop repeating. As time continues, the sense of inner authority becomes quieter, not louder. Authority here is not force, it is absence of interference. When nothing interferes, there is nothing to overcome. Overcoming was never required. The experience continues without internal checkpoints. There is no sense of, now something should happen. Expectations no longer organize perception. Without expectation, the present moment does not need to prove anything. Proving belongs to pressure. Pressure has no place here. The mind adapts to this environment by slowing its internal rhythm naturally, not because it is being calmed, but because speed is unnecessary. Nothing is chasing attention, nothing is demanding response. Speed dissolves when demand disappears. This slower rhythm does not feel heavy, it feels precise. Thoughts, when they arise, feel complete without continuation. They end where they begin. There is no trailing edge pulling awareness forward. Completion does not need closure. As the block continues, the experience remains consistent without feeling static. There is subtle movement, but no direction, like water settling after long disturbance, still moving internally without surface disruption. This internal settling continues quietly. Without surface disruption, the system stops expecting interruption. Expectation was the last place where pressure could hide. Without expectation, pressure has no entry point. Entry points matter. When there is no entry point, there is nothing to resist. As time passes, the sense of me inside this experience softens. The experience no longer feels separate from the one having it. There is no observer tracking it. Tracking would imply distance. Distance has collapsed. What remains is not focus, not effort, not intention, but simple presence without commentary. Presence that does not need to be named. Naming would pull it into thought. Thought is no longer organizing this space. The experience continues, not moving toward resolution, but deepening into normality. Normality is the final stage of integration. When something becomes normal, it no longer competes for attention. Attention is free, and free attention does not wander. It rests. What settles more deeply now is the understanding that nothing needs to be guarded. Guarding was once automatic, almost invisible, a subtle tightening around thoughts, a readiness beneath emotions, a quiet alertness that never fully turned off. That guarding no longer finds a reason to exist. Without guarding, the inner world becomes porous in a healthy way. Experiences pass through without leaving marks. Nothing sticks, nothing accumulates. Accumulation was what once created weight. Weight has thinned. The mind no longer feels responsible for keeping things together. Responsibility implied risk. Risk implied vigilance. Vigilance no longer organizes perception. When vigilance leaves, responsibility softens into trust without effort. Trust here is not belief. It is structural ease. As this ease continues, attention no longer circles familiar concerns. Even when thoughts touch old themes, they do not linger. There is no magnetic pull drawing them back. Magnetism depended on unresolved tension. Tension has lost coherence. The body reflects this loss of coherence by staying settled across longer spans of time. There is no sudden tightening when awareness drifts, no reflexive return to alertness. Rest does not need supervision. Supervision has ended. This changes how silence is experienced. Silence no longer feels like an absence of sound or activity. It feels like a stable medium through which everything else moves. Sound, sensation, and thought all appear within it without disturbing it. Mediums are not affected by what passes through them. As time continues, the sense of inner identity becomes quieter. Not erased, not diminished, simply less involved. Identity once helped manage experience. Management is no longer required. When management ends, simplicity remains. Simplicity does not announce itself. It reveals itself through how little effort is required for things to feel complete. Completeness does not arrive as a moment. It is recognized through absence of lack. Lack no longer shapes perception. The experience continues without landmarks. There is no sense of being closer to an end or farther from a beginning. Linear progression dissolves. What remains is continuity without direction. Direction implied purpose. Purpose implied urgency. Urgency is absent. As this continuity holds, deeper emotional layers begin to reorganize quietly, not by being addressed, but by being unsupported. Emotional patterns require attention to stay active. Attention has moved elsewhere. Elsewhere is not another thought, it is space. Space doesn't argue with patterns, it outlasts them. As the block continues, there is no need to deepen further. Deepening would imply that something is shallow. What is present is already sufficient. Sufficiency is what allows the system to remain at rest. Rest here is not recovery, it is alignment. Alignment feels ordinary, that is its strength. Ordinary states shape life without drawing attention. They persist beyond moments of awareness. As time passes, this alignment begins to feel less like an experience and more like a baseline. Baselines influence everything quietly. Choices feel less reactive. Situations feel less charged. Not because of effort, but because the background no longer amplifies them. Amplification has ended. The experience remains steady, not expanding, not contracting. It holds exactly as it is. This holding is not active. It is simply the absence of interference. Interference was the only thing that ever disrupted peace. Without interference, peace does not need to be protected. It remains. What begins to stabilize at a deeper level is the absence of internal urgency. Not the absence of activity, but the absence of the need for activity to resolve something. The inner world no longer feels as if it is waiting for a signal to act, adjust, or protect itself. Waiting has ended. When waiting ends, time changes its texture. Moments no longer feel like transitions between states. They feel complete on their own. Completeness does not need momentum. It does not need direction. It does not move toward fulfillment because fulfillment is already present. This presence is quiet enough that it almost goes unnoticed. That is how it integrates. What integrates does not demand recognition. It settles into the background and begins to shape perception without effort. Shaping without effort is lasting. As this continues, the mind no longer rehearses possibilities. Even neutral possibilities lose their pull. The habit of scanning future scenarios fades because the future no longer feels like something that must be managed. Management dissolves when trust becomes structural. This trust does not feel emotional. It does not feel reassuring. It feels neutral and dependable. Dependability does not excite, it stabilizes. Stability is what allows the deeper layers to disengage completely. The body mirrors this disengagement by remaining consistent across long spans of time. There are no sudden shifts, no reflexive tightening when awareness drifts. The absence of reflex is the signal that safety has been internalized. Internalized safety does not fluctuate. As minutes extend, the sense of internal dialogue becomes faint. Thoughts no longer comment on the experience. They no longer frame it. They pass through without leaving interpretive residue. Residue was what once carried patterns forward. Without residue, patterns lose continuity. The experience continues without inviting attention. Attention is free to rest or drift without consequence. There is no penalty for distraction because distraction no longer interrupts anything essential. Essentiality has narrowed to what remains. What remains does not need to be named. Naming would reintroduce distance. Distance is no longer present. As the block unfolds, the inner world begins to feel less like a space you are inside and more like the space from which everything else is perceived. This shift is subtle and gradual. It does not arrive as realization. It simply becomes the case. When something becomes the case, it stops being questioned. Questioning dissolves quietly. Emotional echoes that once resurfaced under certain conditions now fail to gather. They appear briefly, without narrative, without pull, and fade. They no longer find support in the system. Support has been withdrawn, not intentionally, but structurally. Structural change is permanent. As this permanence settles, the sense of self becomes lighter, not diminished, not erased, just less involved in maintaining equilibrium. Equilibrium maintains itself. Self-maintaining systems do not ask for attention. The experience does not feel deeper than before. Depth implies layers to move through. What is present now feels flat in the best sense, even stable and continuous. Continuity is what allows long durations to feel effortless. As time passes, there is no internal marker signaling progress. There is no sense of "we are getting closer." Closeness implies distance. Distance no longer exists. What exists simply remains available. Available states do not need to be revisited intentionally. They reappear naturally whenever the conditions allow. And the conditions here are simple: absence of interference. Interference is absent. This absence does not need to be protected. It is not fragile. It is resilient precisely because it does not depend on effort. Effort is no longer organizing experience. And without effort, the system rests in a way that does not need to be maintained, remembered, or repeated. As this continuity holds, something subtle but decisive settles into place. The inner world no longer treats stability as something temporary. Stability is no longer a phase that could pass. It feels established, like a structural condition that does not depend on mood, energy, or attention. This establishment changes how the mind relates to effort. Effort no longer feels useful, not because effort is resisted, but because it has nothing to attach to. There is nothing to fix, nothing to prevent, nothing to secure. Security no longer feels like an outcome, it feels like an assumption. When security becomes an assumption, the system stops revisiting it. Revisiting was a habit formed under uncertainty. Uncertainty no longer organizes perception. As time continues, attention becomes increasingly neutral. It is no longer pulled toward inner states or outer signals. It rests where it is without anchoring itself. This neutrality is not dullness, it is freedom from needing to prioritize. Prioritization belongs to urgency. Without urgency, everything receives equal weight, or rather, nothing feels heavy enough to demand weight. This is how the background quiet becomes spacious without feeling empty. The body reflects this spaciousness by remaining consistent across long stretches of time. There is no need to adjust posture or breath. Movement happens when it happens. Stillness remains when it remains. Neither state interrupts the other. Interruption no longer occurs internally. The mind follows this same pattern. Thoughts may surface briefly, but they do not shape the space they appear in. They pass like ripples that do not alter the surface beneath them. Altering the surface required force. Force is absent. As the experience continues, the sense of internal control fades completely. Control once felt necessary to maintain balance. Balance no longer requires maintenance, it holds on its own. This is why the experience feels increasingly ordinary. Ordinary states do not draw attention, they persist quietly and influence everything else indirectly. Influence without effort lasts. As minutes pass, the sense of doing disappears. Even the act of listening becomes secondary. Listening implies engagement. Engagement implies participation. Participation is no longer required. What remains is presence without assignment. Presence does not need to be directed. It does not need to be corrected. It does not need to be sustained. It simply remains available. Within this availability, older emotional reflexes lose their footing. They may arise briefly, but they do not organize behavior. There is no inner signal telling them they are relevant. Without relevance, they fade. Relevance was their only fuel. As this fuel disappears, the system becomes increasingly quiet at levels that once felt unreachable. Not because something was unlocked, but because nothing is blocking access anymore. Access is natural when resistance dissolves. The experience does not feel like progress. Progress implies movement toward a goal. There is no goal here. There is only continuation. Continuation does not need explanation. As time continues, the inner world stops anticipating change. Anticipation was the last subtle form of tension. Without anticipation, even time itself loses its pull. Moments no longer lead to one another, they simply exist. This is what allows long durations to feel effortless. There is no sense of staying with it. Staying implies effort. Effort is absent. The state holds without supervision, without reminder, without reinforcement. It remains active in the background, quietly shaping perception, response, and rest. And this quiet activity continues, steady, reliable, and uninterrupted, as time moves forward without demand. As this state continues, what becomes increasingly clear is that nothing needs to be sustained by awareness anymore. Awareness was once necessary to keep things from slipping back. Now, nothing slips. The ground is stable enough that attention can move freely without consequence. Freedom here is quiet. It does not feel expansive. It feels dependable. Dependability removes the need for checking. The inner world no longer checks whether it is safe, whether it is calm, whether something is about to change. Checking was a habit formed under instability. Instability no longer exists as a reference. As minutes pass, the mind stops orienting itself around internal signals. Sensations may arise, but they are not interpreted. They do not trigger evaluation. They pass without becoming meaningful. Meaning once carried weight. Weight no longer accumulates. The body remains steady through this absence of accumulation. There is no residual tension building beneath the surface, no subtle tightening waiting to be released. Release is no longer required because nothing is being held. Holding has ended. This absence of holding changes how emotions behave. Emotions no longer gather energy. They appear softly and fade before forming cycles. Cycles depended on repetition. Repetition depended on response. Response has dissolved. As the experience continues, the sense of inner narration fades further. There is no internal voice explaining what this is or why it matters. Explanation was once necessary to maintain orientation. Orientation no longer serves a purpose. Without orientation, the inner world becomes spacious without feeling lost. There is no sense of drifting because there is no destination to miss. Missing implies distance. Distance is absent. The words continue alongside this spaciousness without shaping it. They do not guide, they do not anchor. They exist as part of the environment, not as instruction. Environment holds without direction. As time extends, the sense of personal effort becomes almost theoretical. Effort is remembered as something that once existed, not as something that could return. The system no longer anticipates needing it. Anticipation was the final tether to pressure. With that tether gone, pressure has no access point. It does not return gradually. It simply finds no structure to attach to. This is why the change feels irreversible. Not because something was fought, but because the environment no longer supports the old pattern. Unsupported patterns do not survive. As the block continues, the experience does not deepen. Deepening would imply layers left to move through. What remains feels complete, even as it continues. Completeness does not end experience, it stabilizes it. This stability begins to influence perception beyond the immediate moment. Situations that once carried charge feel lighter when remembered. Future possibilities no longer feel demanding. The background no longer amplifies them. Amplification was internal. The world has not changed. The system has. As time passes, there is no internal signal to mark progress. There is no sense of nearing a turning point. Turning points belong to narratives. Narrative has dissolved. Without narrative, time loses its storyline. Moments exist without leading to one another. This is what allows long listening to feel natural rather than sustained. Sustaining would require effort. Effort is absent. The experience remains available without being monitored. It does not fade when attention drifts. It does not strengthen when attention returns. It remains unchanged. Unchanged does not mean static. It means reliable. Reliability is what allows the deepest rest to occur without being noticed. And that rest continues now, quietly, steadily, without demand, as everything else moves gently around it. As this reliability holds, the inner world no longer reacts to subtle shifts in mood or sensation. Variations come and go without reorganizing anything. There is no need to stabilize them, no need to interpret them as signals. They pass as weather passes through a stable climate. Climate remains, weather moves. This distinction changes how experience is carried. What moves no longer defines what remains. The background does not bend to the surface adapts quietly to the background. Adaptation without effort lasts. The mind begins to function with fewer internal loops. It does not return to the same questions. It does not circle unresolved edges. The habit of looping depended on friction. Friction is absent. Without friction, movement ends naturally. As minutes extend, the sense of inner coherence becomes steady and unremarkable. There is no peak to notice, no depth to measure. Coherence simply exists as the way things are now. Measurement has no role here. The body reflects this by remaining consistent through time, not rigid, not heavy, simply present without adjustment. Movements, when they occur, arise naturally and settle just as naturally. There is no residue left behind. Residue was the carrier of tension. With residue gone, even subtle forms of self-protection dissolve. There is no guarding against thought, against memory, against possibility. Guarding required belief in vulnerability. Vulnerability no longer organizes perception. As the experience continues, the sense of inner authority becomes quieter and more pervasive. Not authority as control, but authority as permission for everything to be as it is. Permission removes conflict. Conflict was the source of internal noise. Noise fades when permission is present. This permission does not feel permissive or indulgent. It feels neutral and firm. Nothing needs to be pushed away. Nothing needs to be invited in. The environment holds its boundaries without enforcement. Boundaries that do not require enforcement are stable. The mind adapts to this stability by releasing its habit of comparison. It no longer compares this moment to previous ones. Comparison once helped orient change. Change is no longer being tracked. Tracking ends. As tracking ends, attention becomes free to rest without purpose. Rest without purpose is deeper than rest for recovery. Recovery implies depletion. Depletion is no longer assumed. Assumption shapes response. When depletion is not assumed, energy does not need to be conserved. There is no subtle holding back. The system remains open without effort. Openness here is not exposure. It is confidence in stability. Within this openness, memories may arise without charge. They do not demand processing. They do not invite narrative. They appear and dissolve, unsupported by the structure that once gave them weight. Weight required reinforcement. Reinforcement has ended. As the block continues, the words remain alongside this quiet without shaping it. They do not ask for agreement. They do not seek resonance. They exist as part of the environment, not as content to be absorbed. Absorption would imply effort. The experience does not need to be absorbed. It is already present. As time passes, the sense of inner direction becomes irrelevant. There is no forward motion to maintain, no backward motion to avoid. Direction was a response to uncertainty. Uncertainty is absent. Absence here is not lack. It is space without demand. This space does not expand or contract. It remains proportionate, supportive, and calm. Calm not as an emotion, but as a structural feature of the environment. Structure persists. Persisting structures do not announce themselves. They influence everything quietly. They outlast moments of awareness. They remain active even when attention turns elsewhere. This is why the experience feels portable without being carried. It does not need to be remembered to continue influencing perception. Influence without memory is integration. As the minutes continue, nothing new needs to be introduced. Nothing needs to be concluded. The continuity itself is sufficient. Sufficiency removes striving. And without striving, the system rests in a way that does not need to be maintained, repeated, or protected. As this sufficiency holds, the inner world no longer relates to experience as something that must be used or taken advantage of. There is no sense of making the most of this moment. That impulse belonged to scarcity. Scarcity is no longer assumed. When scarcity dissolves, urgency dissolves with it. The mind no longer rushes to capture meaning. Meaning does not feel fragile. It does not feel like something that could be lost if not noticed. It remains available without effort, like a background understanding that does not need to be named. Naming would turn it into an object. What is present now is not an object. As time continues, awareness stops returning to the same internal checkpoints. There is no checking whether the body is relaxed enough, whether the mind is quiet enough, whether the state is still present. Checking was the last subtle attempt to control continuity. Continuity no longer needs control. The body mirrors this by remaining neutral across long spans of stillness or movement. There is no internal signal to interrupt rest. There is no reflexive alertness when silence deepens. Silence is no longer interpreted as a transition. Transition implies change. Change is not being tracked. Within this untracked space, even subtle emotional currents lose coherence. They do not build toward expression. They do not seek resolution. They appear briefly and dissolve because there is no structure inviting them to stay. Invitation has been withdrawn. As the experience continues, the sense of internal space becomes more defined without becoming constrained. It feels neither expansive nor narrow. It feels proportionate. Proportion is what allows long durations to feel natural. Natural states do not fatigue attention. Attention no longer needs to be managed. It drifts or rests without consequence. There is no sense that attention must stay engaged for something to work. Working is no longer the framework. Frameworks have fallen away. The words continue alongside this without introducing direction. They do not signal progress. They do not suggest arrival. They remain present as part of the same environment that holds everything else. Holding without movement is stability. As minutes pass, the inner world stops relating to time as a sequence. Moments no longer lead into one another. Each moment feels complete without leaning toward the next. Leaning belonged to anticipation. Anticipation has ended. Without anticipation, the nervous system no longer prepares for what follows. Preparation once felt responsible. Now it feels unnecessary. Responsibility has softened into trust that does not announce itself. Trust here is quiet confidence in continuity. This confidence does not feel emotional. It feels structural, like the knowledge that the ground will remain beneath your feet without needing to be checked. Checking has no function here. As the block continues, the sense of internal movement slows even further, not because things are stopping, but because nothing is pulling. Movement without pull becomes almost imperceptible. Imperceptible movement does not disrupt stillness. Stillness here is not absence of activity, it is absence of demand. Without demand, everything that happens does so without friction. Friction was the source of fatigue. Without fatigue, long presence becomes easy. There is no effort in remaining. There is no effort in listening. There is no effort in letting awareness soften. Effort has exited the system. As time continues, the experience does not accumulate. It does not build toward intensity. It does not crescendo. It remains level, even, and reliable. Reliability is what allows this state to persist beyond this moment, beyond this sound, beyond this setting. Persistence without reinforcement is integration. And that integration continues quietly now, shaping the background of experience without needing recognition, explanation, or protection. As this integration continues, the inner world no longer relates to experience through effortful awareness. Awareness itself has softened into something passive, receptive, and unforced. There is no longer a sense that awareness must stay awake for something to remain intact. Intactness no longer depends on attention. The mind no longer scans for subtle changes. It does not check whether the quiet is deep enough or whether the state is still present. That checking once served a purpose. Now it has nothing to attach to. The absence of checking is the sign that trust has settled at a structural level. Structural trust does not fluctuate. As time moves on, the body remains grounded without anchoring itself. There is no tightening when silence deepens, no reflex to reorient when sensation fades. The body has learned that nothing needs to be regained. Regaining implies loss. Loss is no longer assumed. Within this space, thoughts arise with less definition. They are not unfinished, they are simply unnecessary. They dissolve without asking to be completed. Completion no longer matters when nothing is being pursued. Pursuit has ended. The experience continues without internal commentary. There is no voice narrating what this means or where it leads. Meaning has shifted from something that must be understood to something that is simply lived. Lived meaning does not ask to be interpreted. As minutes extend, the sense of inner continuity becomes effortless. There is no sense of staying with it. Staying would imply effort. Effort is no longer required for continuity to remain. Continuity is self-sustaining. The nervous system responds to this by remaining open without exposure. Openness here does not feel vulnerable. It feels stable and sufficient. Nothing presses against it. Nothing tries to enter or disturb it. Disturbance has no access point. As the block continues, even subtle emotional memories lose their organizing power. They may surface briefly, but they do not shape mood or behavior. They pass as fragments without context, unsupported by the structure that once gave them influence. Influence required reinforcement. Reinforcement is absent. The sense of internal authority becomes quieter and more pervasive. Not authority as command, but authority as allowance. Everything is permitted to exist without reaction. Reaction was what once gave energy to disturbance. Energy no longer feeds disturbance. As this allowance holds, the inner world stops anticipating future needs. There is no sense of preparing for later. Later has lost its weight. Without weight, it does not pull attention forward. Attention remains where it is without effort. The experience does not feel profound. Profundity would draw attention. What is present now feels ordinary, neutral, and deeply stable. Ordinary states persist. They shape life without demanding notice. Persistence without notice is integration. As time continues, the words remain alongside this state without guiding it. They do not introduce direction or resolution. They exist as part of the same environment that holds everything else. Environment does not move, it supports. Support here is silent. It does not reassure, it does not promise. It simply remains reliable. Reliability is what allows the deepest rest to occur unnoticed. As minutes pass, there is no internal signal suggesting that something should end or change. The experience does not move toward conclusion. It settles further into continuity. Continuity does not need closure. What remains now is not something you are doing. It is something that is happening without you needing to participate. Participation would imply effort. Effort has left the system. The state holds on its own, and this holding continues, steady, neutral, and uninterrupted, as time moves forward without demand, without pressure, and without the need to arrive anywhere. As this state continues to hold, the inner world no longer distinguishes between moments of awareness and moments of absence. Both are equally supported. Nothing weakens when attention drifts. Nothing strengthens when attention returns. The system has stopped tying stability to consciousness. This untethering changes everything quietly. When stability is no longer tethered to awareness, the mind stops assigning responsibility to itself. There is no longer a sense that something must be watched, remembered, or maintained. Maintenance belongs to uncertainty. Uncertainty is no longer the reference point. As time passes, even subtle impulses to adjust fade. The impulse to correct posture, to regulate breath, to re-engage attention no longer appears. The body has learned that nothing is slipping away. Learning at this level does not feel like learning. It feels like forgetting effort. Forgetting effort allows deeper layers to disengage completely. Layers that once stayed partially alert, even during rest, now release without signaling. This release is not felt as relief. Relief implies prior tension. What happens here is quieter than relief. It feels like neutrality becoming permanent. Within this permanence, the mind no longer builds inner narratives. Narratives once helped organize experience. Organization is no longer needed. Experience organizes itself without commentary. Commentary dissolves. Thoughts that appear now feel unfinished, not because they lack clarity, but because they no longer need completion. Completion mattered when something was being sought. Seeking has ended. As this continues, the sense of identity becomes less involved in managing inner space. Identity remains, but it no longer supervises. Supervision was a form of control. Control has softened into allowance. Allowance is stable. Stable allowance means nothing needs to be excluded or emphasized. Everything that appears is treated the same way, allowed to pass without reaction. Reaction was the mechanism through which pressure sustained itself. Without reaction, pressure has no movement. As minutes extend, the nervous system begins to operate without its former background tension, not as a peak of relaxation, but as a quiet absence of readiness. Readiness was once constant. Its absence is subtle but decisive. Decisive changes do not feel dramatic. They feel like a new normal that does not announce itself. This new normal begins to shape perception beyond the moment. Situations remembered from the past feel less charged. Situations anticipated in the future feel less demanding. The background no longer amplifies them. Amplification was internal. As the experience continues, time loses its organizing role completely. There is no sense of duration, no awareness of passing, no anticipation of what comes next. Moments exist without linking themselves into a sequence. Sequencing required narrative. Narrative has dissolved. Without narrative, the experience becomes non-linear, not chaotic, simply untracked. Untracked states do not fatigue attention. They allow long presence without effort. Effortless presence is sustainable. The words continue alongside this state without shaping it. They do not draw attention forward. They do not anchor backward. They exist as part of the same environment that holds the experience. Environment remains. As time passes, the sense of inner space becomes quietly resilient. It does not collapse when awareness fades. It does not intensify when awareness returns. It remains unchanged, reliable, and sufficient. Sufficiency removes striving. Without striving, there is nothing to interrupt continuity. Continuity becomes the default condition rather than an achieved state. Default conditions persist. This is why the experience does not need to be remembered to continue influencing life. It does not rely on recall. It operates beneath recall, shaping responses without announcing itself. Shaping without announcement is integration. As this integration settles, nothing new needs to happen. Nothing needs to resolve. Nothing needs to conclude. The absence of conclusion is intentional. This state is not meant to end. It is meant to remain accessible. And it does, quietly, steadily, without demand, as everything else moves around it, unchanged by time, untouched by urgency, and free from the need to arrive anywhere. As this accessibility remains, the inner world no longer treats stillness as something rare or conditional. It is no longer something that appears only under the right circumstances. It feels available, dependable, and present, regardless of what unfolds on the surface. This availability changes how attention behaves. Attention no longer feels responsible for keeping the state alive. It moves freely without consequence. Whether it rests or drifts, nothing destabilizes. Destabilization required effort. Effort is absent. The mind adapts by releasing its habit of subtle vigilance, not the obvious kind, but the background readiness that once lingered even during quiet moments. That readiness no longer finds justification. Without justification, it dissolves naturally. Dissolution here is not release, it is irrelevance. As time passes, the body continues to mirror this irrelevance by remaining steady without feedback loops. Sensations do not trigger reaction. Silence does not trigger alertness. There is no reflexive return to monitoring. Monitoring has ended. Within this unmonitored space, emotional tones flatten gently, not suppressed, not muted, simply even. Evenness does not feel empty. It feels balanced, supported, and sustainable. Sustainability is what allows this to continue for long durations. As the experience unfolds, there is no sense of accumulation. Nothing builds toward intensity. Nothing gathers momentum. Each moment exists fully without leaning into the next. Leaning belonged to anticipation. Anticipation has dissolved. Without anticipation, time loses its pressure. Moments no longer feel like steps in a process. They feel complete, sufficient, and whole on their own. Wholeness does not seek continuation, it allows it. The words continue to exist alongside this wholeness without shaping it. They do not demand attention, they do not frame the experience. They remain present as part of the same environment that holds everything else. Environment does not move, it holds. As minutes extend, the sense of inner authority becomes almost invisible. Authority here is not control or command. It is the quiet confidence that nothing needs to be managed. Management was the final expression of fear. Fear no longer organizes perception. With fear absent, even subtle forms of self-protection dissolve. There is no guarding against memory, against thought, against possibility. Everything passes through without friction. Friction was the source of fatigue. Without fatigue, presence becomes effortless. There is no sense of staying with it. Staying implies work. Work is no longer required. The experience remains stable without supervision. It does not fade when attention wanders. It does not intensify when attention returns. It remains unchanged. Unchanged does not mean static, it means reliable. Reliability is what allows the deepest rest to occur unnoticed. Rest here is not recovery, it is alignment that no longer needs correction. As this alignment settles, the inner world stops preparing for interruption. Preparation was the last place where pressure could hide. Without preparation, pressure has no structure to return to. Return becomes impossible when there is nothing to return to. As time continues, nothing signals closure. There is no internal cue suggesting an ending. This absence is intentional. Endings would reintroduce structure that pulls attention forward. This space does not pull, it allows. And within this allowance, the state continues to exist quietly, steadily, without effort, shaping perception, response, and rest in the background without asking to be noticed, remembered, or maintained. As this quiet allowance remains in place, the inner world no longer feels the need to define itself through contrast. There is no comparison between calm and disturbance, between safety and threat, between before and after. Contrast was once how meaning was created. Meaning no longer needs edges to exist. Without edges, experience becomes smooth. This smoothness does not erase detail. It simply prevents detail from turning into tension. Sensations, thoughts, and emotions may still appear, but they no longer harden into something that needs to be addressed. They remain fluid, passing through without resistance. Resistance was what once gave them weight. The mind adjusts to this fluidity by letting go of its habit of labeling. Labels were once useful for orientation. Orientation is no longer required. What is present does not need to be named in order to remain stable. Stability here is pre-verbal. As time continues, the body remains quietly synchronized with this stability. Breathing continues without becoming noticeable. Posture holds without correction. There is no internal signal suggesting that something must change to keep things balanced. Balance is already present. Within this balance, emotional tones no longer fluctuate sharply. They do not spike or drop. They settle into a narrow, even range that feels sustainable over long periods. Sustainability is what allows the deepest systems to disengage fully. Disengagement here does not mean absence, it means freedom from effort. As the experience continues, the sense of inner space becomes more coherent. Not larger, not deeper, simply more consistent. Consistency is what allows the nervous system to stop recalibrating. Recalibration has ended. The mind no longer revisits old internal checkpoints. It does not ask whether something has shifted or whether it is still working. Working implies a task. There is no task here. This absence of task allows attention to rest without purpose. Rest without purpose does not fade. It deepens naturally because nothing interrupts it. Interruption was the only thing that ever reduced depth. As minutes pass, the inner world becomes increasingly uninterested in control. Control once felt responsible. Now it feels unnecessary. What remains is trust without narrative. Not something believed, but something assumed. Assumptions shape behavior more than beliefs. With this assumption in place, reactions slow without being suppressed. Responses feel spaced out, not delayed. Space appears naturally between stimulus and response. Space weakens urgency. Urgency cannot survive where there is space. As the block continues, the experience does not feel like it is progressing toward anything. Progress would imply a destination. There is no destination here. There is only continuation without demand. Continuation does not require memory. Later, when attention turns elsewhere, this state does not collapse. It does not need to be recalled to remain active. It continues quietly beneath activity, shaping how things are received without announcing itself. This is how integration reveals itself, not through intensity, but through persistence. As time moves on, nothing signals completion. There is no internal sense that something has been resolved or finished. Resolution would reintroduce narrative structure. Narrative is no longer organizing experience. Without narrative, time feels open-ended. Moments do not push toward the next. They exist fully on their own. This open-endedness is not uncertainty. It is freedom from expectation. Expectation was the last subtle form of pressure. With expectation gone, pressure has no mechanism to return. The environment no longer supports it. Unsupported patterns do not survive. As the experience continues, everything remains quietly in place. Nothing needs to be adjusted. Nothing needs to be added. Nothing needs to be removed. What remains is sufficient. And this sufficiency continues now, steady, neutral, and uninterrupted, allowing the state to persist without effort, without attention, and without the need to arrive anywhere. What remains now is no longer an experience in motion, but a state that no longer needs support. Nothing here depends on sound, on awareness, or on continuity of attention. What needed to settle has already done so, not through effort, but through the absence of interference. The mind no longer follows what is happening. Following would imply control. Control has quietly stepped aside. Thoughts, when they appear, do not try to guide or organize the inner space. They pass without authority. The body reflects this by remaining exactly as it is. There are no subtle signals asking for adjustment, no background readiness waiting to return. Readiness has been released without instruction. This is where old patterns lose access, not because they were confronted, but because the internal environment no longer provides what they require to operate. Without access, they do not persist. Without persistence, they dissolve from relevance. Nothing announces this shift, nothing confirms it, nothing closes it. It simply establishes itself. Here, protection is no longer felt as response. It is understood as condition, a condition that does not change with time, with silence, with fatigue, or with sleep. It remains active even when awareness withdraws. This is why the refuge does not need to be defended. It does not need to be remembered. It does not need to be recreated. It is already present. If this space has become a place where you can remain without vigilance, without effort, and without urgency, you are welcome to return to it. Staying connected to this channel is simply a quiet way to keep access to this refuge whenever you need it, at night, in exhaustion, or before rest. Nothing changes after this invitation. The rhythm remains steady. The state does not break. True refuge does not react to being acknowledged. It continues exactly as it was before it was noticed. As time moves forward, there is no sense of closure, no clear transition into an after. What exists now does not end when the sound fades. It continues quietly in the background, shaping without imposing. Psalm 91 remains not as declaration, but as environment. Psalm 35 and Psalm 70 remain not as confrontation, but as silent endurance beneath awareness. The night does not weaken this space. Silence does not thin it. Sleep does not interrupt it. It remains active while the mind rests. It remains present when awareness drifts. It remains stable when nothing is being observed. There is nothing else to do, nothing else to reach, nothing else to close. Remain, if and when you wish, even after the words end, even after attention fades, even as sleep arrives, the refuge remains.